Are you ready for phenomenal thought leadership from the most well-respected leaders in industry? Join us for stellar conversations and sound advice from trailblazers who have a passion for excellence. Learn best practices that will catapult the culture of your company into a new level of greatness. Welcome to Great Companies, Great Leaders. Your host is Christine Gannon.
Welcome to Great Companies, Great Leaders. I'm your host, Christine Gannon, the CEO of Brightworks Consulting, and I'm super excited to have my good friend, colleague, and leader extraordinaire, Cassie Prinke, with us today. Cassie, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Always good to spend some time with you as well.
Cassie is the principal of Business Solutions, an organization she started and leads with a focus to help businesses grow and protect their business, as well as recruit and retain talent, which in the environment we're in right now is extremely important. Cassie has over 25 years of corporate management experience, and she served in the Arizona National Guard. Thank you for your service. She is passionate about helping entrepreneurs, businesses, and veterans, and believes that we have the greatest opportunities and freedoms in this country, which I agree. Also, she believes that most people, including entrepreneurs and business owners, need help to be successful. And today, she enables people to leverage their efforts to build their dreams, protect themselves and their businesses. In her corporate career at Honeywell, she's humble, so she's not going to share any of this, so I get to. But in her corporate career at Honeywell, she served as the executive director of quality and Six Sigma, also the director of process improvement, and many other significant roles. She was a captain in the Arizona National Guard and served as an aviator. Close to home, she's a commissioner for the City of Phoenix Military Veterans Commission, appointed by then Mayor Greg Stanton, now Congressman Stanton. Cassie, thank you so much for serving our country, both in the National Guard and your corporate life.
Well, absolutely my pleasure. And I always say it was an absolute honor and a real privilege to have done that. So thank you.
So you spent some time in corporate America before you launched your own company. Do you think that there's a difference in leadership running your own company versus a corporate setting, and what would that be?
Well, the corporate environment, especially large corporations, because I worked for two Fortune 50 companies, and there's lots of checks and balances in there and, sort of the guideposts that keep you on the right path, because obviously there are large organizations with, lots of people and processes involved. And I think that when you're working as an independent business owner, you really have to set up those guideposts and those processes for yourself. And that isn't always the fun part of being a business owner,
No.
right? But I think that for me, it was so ingrained in my thinking and how I was accustomed to operating that it was sort of ingrained in my DNA by the time I was, owning my own business. And so it was a habit. It was a good habit, right? But I think that if you don't come to business ownership with that sort of structure and framework, that you don't already have those built-in habits, that's one of the things that I think business owners really struggle with, is how do they have the correct checks and balances in the system? Because you may be the very best at what you do, but if you don't have good corporate governance and good checks and balances in your system, it's easy to get off path. And if you're not looking at, the results and the outcomes of things, the further off path you get, the harder it is to correct, right? In corporate America, they've got all the checks and balances, and you never get way far off path unless there's something crazy like a pandemic or something that happens. But normally there's some normal variation in every process, right? But there's checks and balances there, and I think that's the challenge for a business owner, is how do you look at your metrics, how do you manage your business, and how do you have that right framework in place that you may not naturally have. Now, my husband is involved in my business, and he's always helping with that, and he's an engineer and a numbers guy, so it's almost like I have my built-in finance guy. He's not really a finance guy, but he's a numbers guy.
Right.
And he helps, analyze the numbers, the results, and so that's kind of a nice kind of internal check and balance that I have, because he's kind of the outside looking in occasionally. and just, and it's nice whether that's a board of directors or a business partner or someone, but it's really hard to self-govern because, you
Yeah,
just, it's hard to do that by yourself. So I think you've either
absolutely.
got to have a leadership team, a business partner, a board of directors. There's various ways you can do it, but it's a super important thing to have because it's just, as one of my good friends says, if self-discipline was really that easy, we'd all be thin and rich.
Right?
and, and I think that that's just a kind of a good frame of reference when you think about, leading and
Yeah.
managing your business checks and balances are important for everybody.
I think also we aren't great at everything. There are some things we're really
Correct.
good at and some things we're not. Like you talked about finance, like that is not my skill strength. So
Hmm.
surrounding yourself with, just like you would in a corporate environment, surrounding yourself with mentors and coaches and people who do have those skill sets, I think it's really important. So we're talking about qualities of a great leader, and I think you've mentioned some of them. Humility would be one of them, to realize,
Hmm.
you really aren't the end all be all and you need some support. But what are your thoughts on qualities of a good leader?
Well, as I have reflected on my career and just my, whether it's the military or even corporate, especially corporate, I guess I would say is, finding people that have skill sets that are different than yours, and playing to your strength. I mean, I just think that we all have natural gifts that we have, and we have things that we're great at and are almost effortlessly great at, right? And if you understand what those are and you can see those in other people and you can partner with them. And this is something that I really think female leaders have an advantage because I think that it's easier in some ways for women to collaborate. And
Yeah.
when you find a great partner or mentor, it's easier to just, be willing to learn and work together in a win-win in a collaborative way. And so I really think that great leaders do have the ability to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, but also to effectively look at what other people's strengths and weaknesses are,
So
and then
true.
find those like-minded people to help you accomplish your mission, right? So I really think really great leaders because I've seen, very talented people that were just in the wrong role in corporate America.
Right.
And I mean, literally almost being ready to be terminated. And then we get them in the right role and they flourish. And it's way better for them and it's way better for the organization. And I think that is something that, really great leaders can see and know how to leverage. Now, are there some people that just don't have the right skill set or they just don't have the right attitude, whatever, and they're not the right fit for the organization? Yeah, that does happen sometimes. But I think that the reality is often we're just trying to put a round peg in a square hole.
Right.
And I think
Right.
really great leaders see that that's what's wrong, if that is in fact what's wrong, and they can help align the talent to a way to contribute that's going to be a better fit and it's going to be a better outcome for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes a strong leader to be able to recognize that and to not just surround themselves with their buddies, and that
Hmm.
happens on boards of directors. But I want to bring back something you said as well in terms of women and the advantage they have oftentimes. You and I work great together, but not
Hmm.
all women work great together, just like
Right.
all men don't work great together. But I think astute leaders really pick up on, who's my collaborative partner? Who is
Hmm.
in it for the mission and the vision and really is looking to roll up their sleeves and collaborate on solutions and getting the work done. And I think astute leaders really do that. So we're going
I agree. And I think the other thing that really effective leaders can do is who's on your side, who's
to,
in it for the mission, who is their heart's in the right place, for lack of a better description. And when one of those people is willing to come to you and tell you what they see as the problem, first of all, I think as a leader, you have to recognize that when people are telling you something you don't want to hear,
right.
it takes a bit of courage to do that
It does.
because they know this is not what you want to hear. And I was very, very fortunate. One of the things that I think Honeywell did extremely well is um, when somebody in the organization was willing to escalate an issue or, talk about the elephant in the room, right? And I was always willing to do that. But you need to do it in a professional and respectful way, of course. And I think most people, do that. But as a leader, when somebody is willing to come to you with a genuine concern, you need to understand that they already feel a little vulnerable about bringing this
Right.
forward because they're telling you something that you may not really be excited about hearing. But I think as a leader, you've got to enable your team to know it's safe to discuss those difficult subjects with you.
Right.
And because they may be right. They're seeing
Mhm.
something that you're not seeing. It may be a blind spot for you as a leader. It may be just something you don't have visibility to because of your position in the organization. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think kind of get in the way of being able to really see the whole
Right.
picture. And so when they're bringing you a part of the picture that's not pretty and you don't really want to hear or see or whatever, I think you've really got to force yourself as a leader to take that step back, open your mind and hear them out and really consider their concern
Right.
because they have taken some personal risk in bringing this issue to you typically,
Right.
and they know it's not what you want to hear. But if they have worked through that and brought it to you, you've got to seriously think about it because there's some aspect of what they're saying that you definitely are going to need to deal with,
Right.
and you've got to get your mind wrapped around that as quickly as possible and figure it out. Typically, I mean, every once in a while that's not true, but as a general rule, I think that's really something people need to think about if they're going to be an effective leader.
Right. Understanding there's blind spots. You can't be everywhere all the time.
No.
So you have blind spots. So staying in that same area, talking about great leaders and what great leaders do. Talk a little bit about culture and shaping a culture that works. And I think there's tremendous risk when leaders, which we see, leaders do this. They just leave the culture on its own and leave
Hmm.
it to come to fruition. That never works. So,
No.
what are your thoughts on culture and how a leader shapes that?
Right. And I was very fortunate very, very early in my career. I started on the defense side of Honeywell and I worked with Bell Helicopter and I flew Bell helicopters in the Army. So it was just sort of just like feeling like I was at home with the team right from the get-go, although I was very young, my very first corporate job. And I was so fortunate because the OEM, the prime contractor in that deal was Bell Helicopter. And the gentleman that ran the OH-58D team, which we were, developing and launching. And at the time, it was literally the first integrated cockpit. We had all kinds of new technology on the aircraft where we were laser designating targets and handing them off to the Apache helicopter. I mean, it was very Star Wars kind of
Wow.
stuff. And this is back in the like 80s. I mean, it's like I hate to say that I feel like a million years old, but it was interesting because the
Yeah.
leader that I worked with there, the program leader who was basically a VP level at Bell Helicopter, um, he was somebody who very intentionally and repeatedly talked about the culture of the team. And of course, this was a military program, and a lot of the people on it were prior military, like myself. I was far and away the youngest person on the team. Almost everybody on the team was my dad's age, right? But one of the things I saw Jack do over and over again on a regular basis in team meetings, because it really wasn't about the culture of each one of our companies we came from, it was about the culture of the team that was coming together to deliver a brand new aircraft to the military, right? And it was so interesting to see how he managed that. And what I always have done in my career was I looked at really great leaders and successful people in the organization, and I really was a student of what were they doing and how were they doing it, because to me that was a great template, if you will, of
Sure.
like this is what effective leaders do. And the thing that I loved about Jack was he would just on a very regular basis, and one of his favorite things to say was Rangers don't lie to Rangers. Well, that's a military thing, right? And that is, people who are in very difficult military, missions that, it's very critical that, the integrity, the honesty, the collaboration, all of that was really what Jack was speaking to using a catchphrase from the military. But it was really just interesting to see how he constantly repeated the expectations of how we were going to work together to get the job done. And obviously he used a touch point and a frame of reference that most of us understood, but what he was really talking about was honesty, commitment, staying focused on the success of the mission. But he also always had fun in the process. Like literally every quarter when we did project reviews, wherever we were, we would try to find something fun that we would go do as a team as well. So he did a fabulous job, in my opinion, of really driving culture and setting an expectation that the culture of this team was going to be something. And in fact, in a management review in Albuquerque at Honeywell, something came up that I handled per the team culture that was maybe a little different than our corporate culture. And my corporate management was in the room when I did this, but I was just sort of reacting to the culture of the team because that was the norm. And my management was a little freaked out about what I did. And Jack kind of picked up on that. And he literally stopped the meeting and explained to our management, listen, I know that may not have been how you were thinking this was going to be handled, but this is how we handle it on the team. And that's really, I really saw how interesting that he could drive a culture across a hybrid team, if you will. A virtual team was basically what we were. We didn't think about it that way back then, but that's what we were. And he had so successfully driven that culture that we were always on the same page. And we were, crystal clear on where we were going and how we were going to work together. And, and that really made the whole project. And there were plenty of, snags and difficulties along the way, because there's just no way you develop a whole new technology without having some of that. But it was just amazing to see how effective that was. And I think that obviously has stuck with me my entire career is that, your bigger team or your company culture may be one thing, but your operating team can have a little bit different culture and set of norms and that sort of thing. And as the leader, you're going to live and die by the results of that team. So it's very important that you be clear. And, if you leave it up to just willy-nilly, then everybody below you is going to drive things the way they want. And I've seen that go really badly too. So I've seen what's really worked and what hasn't. And when I think leaders allow people below them to just drive a different agenda or a different culture, it can pull people in opposite directions. And that will not be the best outcome for you or your organization typically.
You spotlight a lot of things related to culture that I want to pull out for our listeners. One, taking risks. So you took a risk in that meeting in terms of operating from your team culture versus the corporate culture. Right. Number two, someone had your back. We talked about this a little bit, having people surrounding you that, they're on your team. You're on the same team and they're going to have your back. And he took a risk, probably stepping out to support you at the same time, but knew it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. So he had your back. Communicating, the communication piece that you talked about is so key and not a one time, especially when I think about this environment that we're in, hopefully coming out of this pandemic and the communication styles that leaders have had to really adjust themselves. What are your thoughts related to that in terms of culture right now and leadership?
Well, I just think that another sort of touch point I have from my Honeywell days is that, certainly with all the changes that have gone on, Honeywell has always been very good at adapting early. So they were never an organization that kind of was taking a wait and see approach. They're reading the tea leaves and they're adapting very quickly. And I always saw the wisdom in that is, don't wait, don't hope for it to get better, all that sort of stuff. And, And I was in aerospace during 9/11, and I watched how quickly we had to adapt to that. And that was a good point of reference for me as we went into the whole COVID thing last year, because I'm like, okay, it won't stay in this quarantine lockdown state forever. At least that was what
It
we were
only
hoping
feels
a
that
year
way.
ago.
It only
Yeah.
feels that way.
Yeah, but I still believe that. But what I did recognize is just like at the 9/11 point where, things were done a certain way before 9/11, then after 9/11, we did get the pendulum swing one
Mhm.
direction, then we got a little bit more back to normal, but we never went back to exactly the way we used to do it before. And I saw what was happening with COVID as being the same concept, only on a more systemic level. And so I really was able to communicate to people and say, listen, I've seen this before, or at least something similar, not exactly the same, but a significant emotional event, and certainly
Yeah,
something that changed the psyche of our country, much like I think what COVID is going to wind up doing. And here's what I saw before, and I think we're going to see some similarities and some parallels here. And I was able to use that, but I think that really being able to communicate to people in a way that they can hear what you're really saying, and that
sure.
they know you care, they know that you've seen something like this before, and that you're giving them the best support and guidance you can, given the difficult situation that everybody was in. So, and we continue to struggle with to some extent. So I think that effective leaders really know how to communicate to a person in a way that they're going to hear and
Sure.
be able to deal with. So that's, and that's communicating up and down, and
Yes.
laterally, So you've got to really understand who's my audience, how do
Mhm.
they process data, and
Right.
how can I give them the information they need in a way that they can process and use effectively to move forward.
Valuable information,
Yeah.
Cassie. Thank you so much. Great
Thank you.
nuggets. Great nuggets for leaders to consider. I really appreciate the 9/11 analogy, because I think we are, another crisis, right? Another
Hmm.
crisis that we potentially weren't 100% prepared for, nor could you be. Um,
Right.
so thank you for all that you left our listeners today. Where can people find you?
The best way to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn, and I always love to connect with other business owners on LinkedIn. So, Cassie Prinke on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of Cassie Prinkes out there, so the good news is I'm not too difficult to find. But really connecting on LinkedIn, letting me know, what you're looking for and how we can help, because there's multitude of ways that we can help. And the thing that I love is I find most small business owners know they need our help. They just don't know that we're there, or we have such affordable solutions for them. So would love to help out if we can. So let us know.
Fantastic. Cassie,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Brightworks Consulting hosts this podcast and YouTube channel to spotlight the leadership around the world that is changing lives. Brightworks offers a myriad of consulting services in the public and private sector, to include diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions for any size company. You can find us at www.brightworksconsulting.com. We're honored to have Best Companies AZ as a presenting sponsor for this podcast. Best Companies AZ is your #1 source for regional employer branding. You can find them at www.bestcompaniesaz.com.